Hey there, today I want to talk about my top 10 mistakes of 2019. So let's get into it. So if you're new to the channel, my name is Josh Sattin. I own and run Sattin Hill Farm. Our family owns a 2-acre suburban lot in Raleigh, North Carolina. We have a small market garden. We have pasture-raised chickens for eggs, and we use microgreens, salad greens, stuff like that. We're selling to restaurants. So this is the end of the second growing season, and there are lots of things that happen this year now that it's sort of the end of the year, and I'm trying to do a little bit of reflecting and sort of planning for next year. And I think it's really important that we share not only our successes but our failures, and I think that's really important because most of what you see online is, you know, everyone's successes. You see beautiful pictures on Instagram, you see beautiful farms on YouTube as well, and so I think it's important that we share all this kind of stuff and so we can all learn from each other. All right, let's get into the top 10 mistakes here. First one is not switching things up quick enough. I know a lot of us have an idea about what we want to grow, how we want our farm to run, crops we want to sell, that sort of stuff, or growing methods, things like that. And when things don't work, you need to be able to make adjustments and make changes. And I think a lot of us tend to stick with the same path for a long time and just keep doing the same thing over and over again, and it's not working. And I think that's a really important thing to think about, is that when things aren't working, make a pivot, make a change, make things work. All right, so that first one was kind of vague. The second mistake that I made this year was in crop selection. And you have to be careful because a lot of times you'll grow what you want to grow, what you think will sell well, what you want the farm to be known for, things like that. And the reality is you have to grow what you're going to be able to sell. For example, this year I grew a lot of lettuce because I really like growing lettuce. When I switched from families to restaurants, I figured I could just keep growing lettuce. And the bigger crop right now for me with my restaurants is arugula. So you know what I'm growing more of now? Arugula. So don't just plant what you want to plant and then try to sell it. Like, try to figure out what is actually going to sell in your market, and that's what you should be growing. So the third mistake is our poultry, and we used to have ducks. And if you guys weren't following along before I started YouTube, but you were following me on Instagram, you probably saw some of this, but we had a lot of ducks for egg laying, and that was a mistake for us in our context. Now our neighbors were just really unhappy with all the noise because if you guys don't know, the female ducks make a lot of noise. And so we made the switch back to chickens. And at the time, it was also a big assumption about ducks that we were going to be selling a lot of duck eggs, and our families weren't taking the duck eggs as much and hoping to sell to more restaurants. But when we switched back to chickens, our families took more eggs, and now I'm not selling to families anymore, but I am selling to restaurants and they're taking chicken eggs. So that's been a big change for us, but it's actually worked out in our favor. All right, number 4, and probably the largest mistake this year, was the expansion that I did this spring. Now we expanded up to about 1/8 of an acre in vegetable production, and that was way too much. We now have 19-ish 50-foot beds, and we expanded up to 29 at one point this year. And for just me working here, first of all, it was too many beds for me to stay on top of, and secondly, it was more produce than I needed to grow. And so it's been a struggle for me to sort of admit that, because I did spend a lot of time building new beds. I spent a lot of money on bringing in compost. I planted a lot of these beds, and it was just a lot of work that sort of didn't have to have happen. And so that's been a big mistake for me. And if you guys saw the video where I sort of covered them up with tarps at one point during the summer just to put a pause on it, I've now just planted grass, and I'm going to be using this land for the chickens. So, I'm showing you the mistakes here, but also sort of the things that I've done to overcome those mistakes. So if you are thinking about expanding, be very careful about that this year, and make sure that you can handle the new amount of land, and make sure that the land that you're growing on right now is really maxed out, because I always feel that we can be more efficient with the same amount of space that we have. More land just means more weeds, it means more planting, it means more nursery starts, it means more everything. And so just keep that in mind. I think we can all be more efficient on a smaller space if you really try to do that. All right, number 5, let's talk about brassicas for a second. Now, my first season, I grew a lot of brassicas and had a lot of struggles with them in the summertime. And so main thing is like flea beetles and other insect pressure. And so I knew that going into this year, and so I made the assumption that I could just use lightweight Agribon to cover that, and that did not work. It was just too hot here in the summer. I should have invested maybe in insect netting, and I'm not a huge fan of that kind of stuff. I'd rather grow things that work with nature, not against it, as much as I can. And so I made that mistake this year. Was like, that was a big part of my crop plan, was growing brassicas under lightweight row cover, and it just did not work. So about halfway through the season, I said, you know what, no more brassicas during the summer, and I'm gonna stick to that plan next year. That has been a huge mistake of mine, and I just really it was a real bummer for me because that was a big part of my plan. So brassicas in the summertime here in North Carolina, very hard to do without either spraying stuff, which I don't do, or making sure you cover it with proper insect netting. All right, number 6, let's talk about tomatoes. I grew a lot of cherry tomato plants this year, and it turned out to be quite a disaster for a few different reasons. One is I really didn't like growing them in this small tunnel, and I did it last year as well, and I had a little bit different of a setup, and I think the setup was a little bit better this year. But it's just really hard to grow tomatoes in a short tunnel. I think it's challenging because there's not a lot of space, not just height-wise, but also, you know, just working around the plants. So I think that was a struggle. We had a strong battle with hornworms, which we got over, and then the squirrels came in and just decimated our tomatoes this year. And it's really hard to admit that, but that is something that I'm really considering for next year, and I don't think I'll be growing tomatoes. It just wasn't worth the effort for the amount of yield that we got, and it's just, that was a really big mistake this year. I spent a lot of time, you know, starting tomato plants, transplanting them, pruning them, and then coming in here and battling pests and squirrels, and then just losing most of our crops. So moving forward, I'll probably just be growing greens in here. I also have a little bit different of a setup in here. I'm doing 3 36-inch beds. This is a 12-foot wide by 48-foot tunnel, and this seems to be working great. I've been really happy with the setup. So this is mid-December right now. We got arugula and we got lettuce in here. So I don't think I'll be doing tomatoes next year. I might cover this with shade cloth and just keep greens in here. So the 7th thing is sort of along the same lines as the tomatoes, in the sense of the summer strategy here was a real challenge and mistake this year. And I sort of mentioned this before about the brassicas and the tomatoes, but the bigger thing was the heat. And I know it's something a lot of southern growers are really struggling with this. And it's something that was a big mistake for me because I had in my head of planting baby greens and other stuff where, you know, it takes a lot of bed flips. They're very quick growing crops. They require a lot of attention. And so I think my strategy next summer will be different in terms of crop selection. Be doing more longer term stuff like eggplants and peppers and things that require a little bit less day-to-day maintenance and attention. And I think that was a big struggle this summer because trying to find that rhythm in the summertime is really hard. And we had like 80 days over 90 degrees here, and you know, we have very high humidity, so from like after 11 o'clock in the morning it's almost impossible to work outside in the sun. And so that's been a real struggle for me, and I can't get out too much earlier because I have to get my kids off to school and stuff like that. So the summer strategy was a real struggle for me. I didn't have a lot of crops growing, and it's something that I'm gonna have to figure out a different strategy for next year. All right, so the next mistake, well, I thought this was a good spot, but now the sun's blinding my eyes. Let me move. I do a lot of filming here on my property, and I'm always looking for different places to film. So anyways, this will work. Number 8 mistake this year were my sales outlets and strategies. And if you guys have been following along, I was doing family sales and family boxes, greens boxes, home delivery kind of thing for a year and change. And it was a great way for me to get started, but then I realized that it wasn't working for me because my crop selection really decreased. And I think to be successful for a sort of a home delivery system or a CSA or a box program of any sort, you need to have a larger variety of crops. And once I started dialing down the number of crops, it was harder and harder to fill boxes. And that in addition to having some struggles this year with getting crops to grow in the middle of the summer and the heat, it just didn't really work out. And so I switched to restaurants completely, but that's what's great. But the mistake here was that I tried to do an online sales model that was a la carte, so people could just go on. Every week I'd update what I had. They could go in and pick exactly what they wanted, and for vegetables and eggs and microgreens, and then I would deliver them. And I didn't get much conversion from my weekly box customers to that program, and I didn't pick up very many new customers, and it just really wasn't worth my time. So that was a mistake. It wasn't a huge investment. I did set up a website and some other stuff, but I did put quite a bit of time into getting that going, and that just sort of fizzled out. So that was a big mistake for me, was that a la carte online sales ordering. I just realized that for those kind of customers in my context and my relationships and connections that I have here, people were really into just getting boxes delivered pretty much weekly. They didn't want to spend the effort to then go online and pick things out. So that could work in other markets, but it didn't work for me in my context at that time. All right, so the last 2 mistakes are kind of similar, but we'll list them separately. Number 9 is just focusing on too many things. You guys know that YouTube takes up a lot of time as I'm posting twice a week. I also do a lot of stuff for my family and my kids, and running a farm and managing all of the aspects of that. So marketing, sales, delivering, all the farm chores as well, and the animals. And so I just did too many things. And so I started dialing things back towards the end of the year, doing less field crops, focusing more on microgreens and eggs, just trying to focus on the things that are important and are working. And so if you guys don't know the 80-20 rule, I really firmly believe in that. And sometimes it takes a while to figure out what those things are. But basically 80% of your business comes from 20%. So you really want to focus on that little bit and dial those things in and make those things the things that you concentrate on. Now, if you're doing too many things at once, you wind up doing none of them really well. So I really think that it's important to focus on less things and do them better, and you'll be able to focus and execute better. All right, the 10th and final mistake of this year, which I know pretty much all of us are guilty of, is working too much. I think we all tend to work too much. If you're an entrepreneur at all, or you're a farmer, we tend to take a lot of free time and turn that into work time. And it's something I'm trying to be more conscious of. I'm trying to, as I said before, do less things, focus more, and maybe even take some time off. I feel like, especially when your farmer's at your house and there's something to do, you wind up doing it on the weekends or when you have spare time. So it's something that you should all consider, is sort of trying to find that balance and trying to figure out what's working for you, what you're making money on, what you're finding satisfaction in, and trying to focus on those things so you can have more time for things for yourself or your family. Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed this. I think we can all learn from each other, and I think myself I'm guilty along with everyone else here that we tend to just focus on all the good things that are going on, and it's easy to show that world on YouTube and Instagram and everywhere else. So hope you guys found value in this. Hopefully you guys can do some reflecting on 2019 and look forward to a fantastic 2020 as this year is wrapping up. If you guys have any comments, leave them down below. If there's things that you guys really struggled with this year, and love to hear from you. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.